Hi, everybody. Welcome to Shakey's Sports Journeys. You can find us by simply searching Shakey's Sports Journeys on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Please do subscribe. Loads of different content from loads of different sports. But being a very keen boxing fan, it's an absolute privilege today to welcome to the show legendary boxing promoter, Glasgow boy, which makes us even all prouder. I welcome Tommy Gilmour. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me on here today.
It's a pleasure to have you, Tommy. Absolute pleasure to have you. You've flown the flag for Scotland. So many ways. And we're proud of you. So I would really want to pick your brains today and hear your story. And what I want to do is take you all the way back. So get that memory hat on, and start by just talking about where you were born, where you were brought up, the family, a bit about your childhood.
I was brought up in the Oaklands, which is down near where Sheffield Stadium was, because that was a very famous place at the time for boxing taking place, and then the Greyhounds, and then obviously Clyde Football Club. So that was where I was brought up. We never ever moved. We always stayed up close. Because my mother, and she came from a very poor background in the East End of Glasgow and Bridgeton, and she never wanted to move to the big house in the hill, even though my dad bought her one, and she just said she wasn't moving. So she was a very humble woman, but a very, very smart, helpful person, very charitable to our pals and everything else. We stayed in the Oaklands, and we probably had. We had a car, and we had a fridge, and we had a telly, and everything like that, So if there was anything on way back when in the early 50s, when it was, just a wee 14 or a 16-inch screen, our pals would come round and watch the telly in our house, So that was it. We came from a very working class background, but I would say that. As compared to all my pals and everything round about it, I was probably, brought up with a wee bit of silver spoon, because I never wanted for nothing, thankfully.
So you're born into a family that already had boxing in the blood. I mean, looking into your story and doing a bit of research, you weren't the first in the family to start in the boxing. So were you always introduced to that from a young age?
No, because boxing is such a hard game that it's one of these sports that if you want to go into it, we were never encouraged or discouraged. I had an older brother, we didn't really go. My dad done some boxing, but he had bad eyesight way back in the days when it was dreadful, when he had cataracts. Right, okay. Which he got for an illness when he was young. But the whole thing started off 1920 when my grandfather boxed for Great Britain in the Olympics, and that was the first Olympics after the First World War. So when you see pictures of the whole British team, everybody, there is more people come to your house party on a Sunday than what the whole team was made up of. But that was a kind of starting thing. My grandfather, he was the champion of Great Britain and Denmark. Now, people will say, well, how did a boy for Tullis Street in Bridgeton become the champion of Denmark? Well, what actually happened in those days, if you beat the champion of Denmark, you became the champion of Denmark. The same as when we beat the English in 1967, we became the champions of the world. Right, okay. We took off them. They weren't the world champions. We were the world champions. So you had that. I think they just stole that. They just stole that for us with the boxing. So that was why my grandfather, and he was probably late when he turned pro. And he only had a few, but he was very successful as his record suggests in the amateur world.
What weight did he fight at, Tommy?
Lightweight, but he if you've seen a picture of him, I mean, he was the most perfect specimen. He had the type of body then that you get the people today having with other sports scientists and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But my grandfather worked in the shipyards, and he was he was what they called in the shipyards a hodder on. You know, and people who are no familiar with Glasgow speech, a hodder on was the fella who held the rivets when the riveter was putting them into the ships.
Okay.
So that made him, he was the guy that held it. So he was a hodder on. So
I'd imagine that would have taken some strength, and that's why he was the guy who done that.
I'm not sure how much they actually done, because him and his great pal in the shipyards when they worked in Fairfield, they run the pitch and toss schools. Now, the pitch and toss schools with the gambling, all the working class men, you know, heads and tails and so forth. So I think they probably spent more, you know, time pitching and tossing than trying to make us the kings of the empire by building ships, which was maybe thankful for the folk who sailed in ships, you know. But Sammy Wilson was his pal, and that was the beginning of another great thing, because in those days managers couldn't become promoters. So when Benny Lynch was turning professional, he had spoken to my granddad, but my granddad was a promoter by this time and couldn't manage him. But his best pal was Sammy Wilson. So the very first manager that Benny Lynch had was Sammy Wilson, who was my grandfather's pal. And then my dad by that time, because my dad managed his first fighter when he was 14, which was 1924. Wow. And people say, well, every corner had boys that were fighting, you know, they were that was just after the war. But my dad, because his eyesight couldn't box, so he managed his pals. And he went on where Lynch and them were boxing, but my dad actually managed a fella for Bridgeton again, Paddy Docherty. And Paddy Docherty beat Benny Lynch 5 times, 3 times out of 5. So, but Paddy was never, he was just the guy that always had he had that, he knew how to beat Lynch. Mm-hmm. He wasn't in the same class as Lynch, if you know what I mean, but that was just
had his number. Just had some players that just got the other's number.
He had his number. So, but remember, now we're talking about the 1924. That was 5 years before the Boxing Board of Control became a body, because before that you done everything. If you win the British title, you win the National Sporting Club title, and it didn't happen. You didn't win the title unless it was in the National Sporting Club, and it was all the, you know, there was that great divide, you know, because the people who went to the boxing in the National Sporting Club were the gentlemen, you know, where places like St Andrews Sporting Club was founded, and with the black tie and sitting there, and the king would go to the boxing and so forth. So 1929, the Boxing Board was founded, and it was all these gentlemen, Lord this and Lord that, and Admiral this and Admiral that became the backbone of when the board started in 1929. But we were there before they were, so that was the one thing. We played a big part in, you know, through the years, my granddad, and then my dad in particular, and then when we got into the 70s, you know, more of myself, you know.
Yeah, so let's talk about you then, Tommy. Obviously, your granddad, your dad. Like I said, you've got a great heritage in boxing. When did you start showing the interest, and how did your journey start evolving in boxing?
Well, it probably was never. I didn't take it. I done like all kids through our neighbourhood. We all done a wee bit of boxing and so forth, you know. But that was it. But my pencil was always sharper than anything that I could do with a jab, you know. I was the boy that I could count up the wages at the end of the night. Okay. That was what my thing. But I never really wanted to manage fighters. I always just wanted to be a promoter. I wanted to put on big fights that people would go and they would shout and scream and sing, and I just liked that whole production thing, you know. And because my brother, he used to hold the numbers up, which my dad done way back in his early days, way back in the 20s. But my brother, he held up the numbers, you know, before the days of Dolly Birds, and then when he was 7 years older than me, so when he moved on, I went into take over. My brother used to get back then, he would get 10 and 6s for holding up the numbers.
Oof, I'd imagine it's a few more bob than that these days for the
tell you, and that was probably my getting into business. When I took over, I was the best, and I didn't work for 10 and 6s, so I got a guinea, which was twice as much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you get what you pay for. So that was me. I went in and I got a guinea, and I remember one of the times I went in at the end of the night to get paid, and they gave me £1, and I would only probably be, I would guess, maybe about 10 or something. And I went, no. I said, what's that? I said, that's your money. It's only £1. I said, I get a guinea. You owe me a shilling. You owe me another shilling. Oh, yeah. You'll make it up the next time. You'll make it up the next time. No. The deal is, I get 21 shillings. I get a guinea. So that's what and I'm not moving. And they were all queuing up outside all the boxers and everybody to get paid. But I wasn't moving till I got my guinea. And I got my guinea.
Rightly so.
Absolutely.
I'd imagine when you've sat around a few tables making a few fights over the years, you weren't leaving the table until the deal was done fair and square. And
So that was me getting involved. But I played more football when I was young, and you know, and I was pretty good. Everybody says, "Oh, Tommy was a top class football player," but in Scotland and in Glasgow, when we played for the Glasgow team, and then we went for the trials for the Scotland teams and so forth, I was second best. There was a boy for Castlemilk, and he ended up going on to play for Celtic and so forth. So I wasn't bad. But
you were just there or thereabouts.
Aye.
But you know, there was other talent that was just ahead of you. That sometimes
they were just better. And this fella wasn't as big as me, and everything else. But he could jump higher than me. He could run faster than me. He could do everything, and he was just one of the best players I've ever seen. But went by the wayside when he went to Celtic and never really realised his potential. But he was a great player. So I played wee bits and pieces with amateur teams and stuff like that. But I went out one day, didn't have a bad game, but didn't enjoy it. Don't tell me why. We probably even win, but I didn't enjoy it. And I went, I really don't want to do that again. And I just, for that day onwards, and I would be, maybe about 18 or something. And I just didn't want to do it again. And I walked away from it, for the football. And I started to learn my trade with it, because I'd always been in and about the gyms every weekend with my dad and so forth.
Would that be the famous St Andrews Sports Club? Was that part?
No. This is years and years. That wasn't even a twinkle by then.
All right. Okay.
I'm going way back to the late 50s and 60s when I started to go to the gym with my dad, because Sunday was a great day, and we had the Scottish National down in North Street, or in Olympia Street, down at Bridgeton Cross, and that's where everybody met. All the fighters came from all the different gyms, and we had all the best fighters that my dad had at that time, and there was loads and loads of sparring, and that's where I first came across. And the only person I ever idolised in the boxing, and I've met everybody, was Chick Calderwood. And when he was in the dressing room, and as a youngster, I would cut off his tapes and so forth at the end, and he was always really nice to me. He was a big guy with most people, but with me he was never. And And that was it. So I would end up, I was always in and about and watching and learning and seeing what was happening. And then when I took a more serious side to it, and just became a second in the corner, working in the corners, holding up a spit bucket, listening to what was happening, all the different trainers and managers for all over Britain. And you were just learning, and then you would go to the gym 3 times a week on a Sunday, and you would work alongside some of the trainers back then, you know, like Donkey Jowett and so forth. And you would learn. And my dad was a great teacher. You know, when there was a problem with the trainers, my dad would go in with the boxers, and he would teach them, and it was very cool and calm, and particularly in corners. I never wanted to be, that was my early involvement. But so for I was about 21, I then get involved, and my dad was still living, and I get involved in doing things for, taking a matchmaker's license and started making matches for all the different promoters up and down the country. And, you know, and then ended up promoting shows with one of the trainers that was there was Henry Hoy. So Henry and I run some shows together, and they were reasonably successful. We would use my dad's fighters, and, you know, so that started to do it for me. But as I was growing up and holding the numbers up, I used to go to the Kelvin Hall, and it would be, sometimes it was Peter Keenan shows, but the person who I admired most as a promoter was Jack Solomons, who, for me, he was the eternal great showman. And I just wanted to be a big promoter, because Jack was meticulous. When the boxers left the dressing room, he could tell you that it took, 63 seconds to walk from the dressing room to the edge of the ring, and all that. Everything was just
perfect.
Perfect. And he would go and change into his white jacket and his flower for the main event and stuff like that. And there was just something magical about that. And that's where I probably got the main bite for doing that, because my dad managed fighters. He didn't promote fighters, because, as I said, in those days, managers couldn't be promoters, which they can now. And I was part of it, but I never agreed with it. But it was just, that was how the game was moving. That, to be successful, you had to manage and promote fighters and so forth. So we've done that, and then I was still working. I was an engineer, a printing engineer. And I was doing the boxing on the side as a wee earner. And then my dad died in 1979. By this time I had a manager's license, but I would never ever become a manager, because I was never as good as my dad. And I still say it, because he knew more. He knew more about boxing than I'll ever hope to achieve. But I was young and enthusiastic, and I would probably I would have been ducking and diving all over the place. But he was my dad, and we didn't go against. So he managed fighters, and I promoted, and we had some almighty roars, at the start when we started talking, in those days, the boxers would maybe get £65 or £75, and wow. and my dad would want £80, and I would say, "You're not getting £80, you're getting £65." No, and we would have rammies, and then he would say, "Well, you're only arguing like that because I've taught you well." I went, "But you're still not getting it. But it's worth it. No, to me, it's not. And see, if you don't like it, your boy's off the bill, right?" And, so we would have almighty rammies, and he never ever says that's it. But I know that behind my back, he would say to his pals or whoever he was talking to, his newspaper guys, when "Our Thomas is doing okay," because my family called me Tommy. "Our Thomas He's doing all right. He'll be bigger than me. But my dad only had two people ever fought for a world title, never managed a world champion. And here was me, you know, that I ended up with 6 world champions. I ended up with promoting in excess of and being involved in excess of 70 world championship fights and stuff like that. But I couldn't have, you know, sold my dad's boots, you know, and it was always that. But I know that's what they're going to be doing, and right now that we're in talks with, that there's that the fella, I don't know if you've maybe seen his stuff, that Bend It Like Baxter and Bend It Like Bratback and stuff like that. Well, we're talking. He's writing a thing, you know, that will be about me and Pat Clinton for the World Championship, with Tommy Gilmour and Jim Gilmour looking down to make sure that we were doing it all right. So
that'll be some piece. But that takes me on quite nicely, actually, into that conversation, because that was your first promotion of a world title fight. It was at the Kelvin Hall, which must have been a dream for you, because, like you say, Mr. Solomon, you looked up to him and he'd been doing stuff there. So that must have been a dream for you, and the fact it was a world title. But talk to me a wee bit about Pat and your journey with him and leading into that.
Well, what actually happened, I didn't manage Pat for the beginning. It was Burt McCarthy. And Pat had went down after he came back for the Olympics in Los Angeles. He signed and he went down. And all his fights mainly were in England, and he was away. But after a few years, you know, Pat was good, because Pat in the times, he went to Italy and won the European title and got a points verdict against Salvatore Fani. Now, you didn't go to Italy and get, so that was how good Pat Clinton was. Mm-hmm. But he just needed a wee break. And we're better to have a wee break than among your own people. You know, so when he's contracting, there was never any bad feeling, because when Pat fought for the world title, I invited his old manager to come and sit at the ringside, because he'd done that much to help him. So when Pat was looking to do something else, and remember, probably Pat Clinton's best years might have been nearly behind him, as he was getting older, and it was getting harder and harder to make 8 stone. But he came to my office at that time in the Albany, and he was sent to me by Jim Reynolds, who was a friend of Pat's brother Michael at the Croy Miners. And Jim Reynolds, he was the top football writer at the Herald, and we were great pals and so forth. He said, "You interested in having Clinton?" I said, "Aye." He said, because by that time I was doing the sporting club, I was getting television, I was, you know, it was a great time for to be involved in that in the late 80s. I said, "Aye." So Pat and Michael came to see us, and he says, "What can you do for you?" So, "I'll get you a world title fight." "Will you?" I said, "Aye." So I ended up, I put him on a show in St Andrews, just to get him, because he hadn't boxed for a long time, and I put him in at the sporting club, just to get rid of the cobwebs. So I had a couple of fights, and then I got a call late one night, because Clinton, it was well, as I said, Burt McCarthy name had done a good job for him, so he was well rated in the WBO. So I got a call from Miami, and they said, "Are you interested in a world title fight for Pat Clinton?" I said, "Aye." Well, they were having their convention. "Well, you'll need to come to it." So I phoned my pal in London, Paddy Byrne. Now Paddy was one of the best agents in the world, a great long time pal of my dad. Pat, he's still living, he's in his 90s now, and we still keep being in it. But it was unbelievable. If he didn't know you or you didn't know him, you weren't really in the game, you know. But I said, they want me to go to Miami tomorrow. I says, "You'll need to come with me." So we got tickets. We didn't know how we were getting there, but we ended up I flew down to London, met him at London, had got a couple of tickets, got us to New York, to LaGuardia, and then we managed to buy tickets at LaGuardia to get us to Miami, and we ended up going to the hotel in Miami, and it was all that small. It was like you were going to meet the cartel. You were sitting down, and I was only in the days I had black hair, and I would say a slightly boyish look. And Paddy had done everything because he had been the man at the worked with Barney's with McGuigan, and Paddy had been everywhere. But they've sat down and they all knew Paddy, but here was me, and I sat down and they said, aye. So we started talking about money. So I said, aye, okay, we've got a deal. Oh no, but we need an extra airfare or whatever. Aye, okay, you've got it. That's us got a deal. Oh no, thing we still got a wee bit. You'll need to maybe buy him out of this contract. Aye, okay. Because I was enthusiastic because I wanted the world title fight, you know. And I just didn't. You were sitting with these guys, and I knew all the bits and pieces because I'd been through contracts and all that with my dad and all through the years. But every time I was getting a deal, they moved the goalpost. Got a deal. Aye, but. So eventually I went off and I threw the table up in the air. And I went, oh, stick it up your jacksie. Yeah. So I got up to walk away, and Paddy, because Paddy was very kind of, could read the situations. And he went, can I do that? I said, I've just done it. It's too late. I've just done it. Stick the... I'm not getting...
Taking the piss, really, aren't they?
I am, absolutely. And so I ended up, I just threw the table, lifted this table with the sixes or that was sitting around about, I went, oh, yeah. And walked out. And I says to Paddy, right, I'm going to the shopping centre. I said, I'll need to get presents for my two kids, Stephanie and Christopher. So he came with me, and we went wandering around the big shopping centre in Miami. And then a voice shouting, Paddy, you'll need to come back again. I said, I'm not going. I said, I've got things to get for the Waynes. So, no, you'll need to come back. So we went back, and right, that's us, we've got a deal. I said, no, you've not. I gave you a deal, and you told me no. So, I'm not doing it. We'll go back to the original deal, where you told me in the first instance. We'll go back to that.
Pay your own airfare. Get your own airfare out of your own cut.
Aye, I said, so that's the deal on the table. And they didn't really want it because Clinton was number one, they would have went to purse offers. Now, Cedro Perez couldn't draw his breath because there was no money in Mexico for it. We bid for the fight.
Mm-hmm. Whereas you were going to be able to probably fill out Kelvin Hall.
Aye, so we were going to do this, and I would have done that anyway, but I just didn't, I wasn't being taken for a mug. So I ended up, they didn't want to go, so they ended up, they weren't too happy, but it was either take my offer or we go to purse offers. So that was it. So we ended up, we done the deal, we got our flights back, and I felt like the biggest promoter in the whole world. I was the bee's knees. So I'm sitting on the plane, flying back to London, and they had the telephones in front of you on the plane, on the seat.
Really?
Aye. So they had that. So I went like, hello? Speaking to my wife. And I says, that's us, we've got the world title fight. So she was delighted for me, because she'd always backed me all through. It was her who made me, for my job in the factory, that had encouraged me to take the redundancy money and put it on to buying the St Andrews and everything. Much is it going to cost you? I said, I reckon £100,000. She went, you don't have £100,000. I had £100,000 assets, but I didn't have £100,000 in the bank at that time. She said, but we'll make it work. And we did. And I come back and I went, Glasgow got behind me. And that was a great thing. Glasgow gave me £20,000 of help, as a guarantee against loss. No, they didn't give me money, but we done a deal whereby, because I was always against using taxpayers' money to enhance a person's profits.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, no, it's not the money I'm looking for. I just need you to give me a wee cushion. So that was me doing to only losing 80 grand, right? So they ended up, they backed me, but in return, I gave them 20% of the profits. For every £1,000 that they guaranteed to give me if we lost. And probably today, if you went through Freedom of Information, I am the only person that's ever done anything like that with the council, because I gave the council back money at the end of the fight.
Nice.
Gave them money, and that was a wee bit of kind of pride in me, because it let me stick to my principles and no taking taxpayers' money, because that's not what they're there for. So I got them on board. We were sponsored at the St Andrews Sporting Club by Tartan Special, and under McEwen's they sponsored Rangers.
Okay.
But Tartan Special, and we had done all these bits and pieces, but the amount of money that I needed from the sponsor, Tartan Special's budget didn't have that. So I'd seen the bosses at the Tartan Special, and they went, I will just stay it, but the budgets will not be able to pay you for 2 months or 3 months. I said, that's all right, don't worry, I'm putting the things together. So we got that, and then BBC Scotland, they were coming in to do it, but with the amount of money that I needed for the sponsor, I needed national television. So we had to deal with London, and they really didn't care. Who did they care about? They knew who I was, and we knew they had the BBC Scotland contract, but they weren't all that keen. And they ended up, they gave me buttons. But if I wouldn't have taken the buttons, I couldn't get the national money, because we run it under McEwen's lager. So I needed to get national television to secure my sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up, I let them take me down. And the guy that took me down is since, I had so much respect for him. He ended up head of the, not just of the BBC, but he headed up the Football League, was Brian Barwick, a Scouser. The Brian, he knew everything about sport. He was and he was a double wide Scouser. And he just, and we've laughed about it since, but he done me a great favour years later when he had retired and he went to the football. That was signing a fighter up in Manchester, and then walked Brian Barwick. I hadn't seen him for years. And Brian says to the fighter, you've got a good man there. One of the best and most honest guys I've ever met in my life. And the boy signed with me. And I says to Brian, he says, no, I just said what I wanted to say. But I'd always built up these friendships through the ages. So I ended up, that was me, I got to television. And then I always wanted the big banners across Buchanan Street and all around about the town. So I went to Strathclyde Regional Council at that time when it was in the go. Because I didn't even know that you had to get permission for the council, so you just paid for the banners and you could. So they said, right, that's your bit into it. For 6 weeks before the fight, we will put up all the banners that will say, come to the boxing. Mm-hmm. So they done that. Then the Lord Provost, Susan Baird, Susan ended up, she supplied all the kit for Pat with the tartan Glasgow tartan shorts, Glasgow tartan this. So the whole community got behind me, everybody.
Brilliant.
That was a great Celtic man. So Celtic, they sold tickets for the fights. I was very friendly with all the people who were at Ibrox. And that was the first call I got. They said, Tommy, we want to get behind you. We'll sell the tickets in the Rangers shop. So a divided city that all came together because I was one of theirs and they wanted to help their own son. I think they actually wanted to help Tommy Gilmour, the Glaswegian, rather than they wanted to help Pat Clinton. Because everybody just got behind it. And then a bombshell. The SFA, they then up it was a game that hadn't taken place. So the night that Pat was to fight for the world title, there was a rearranged Celtic game taking place at Parkhead.
Oh.
You could have choked
one of the biggest nights in Scottish boxing for 50 odd years, and that was so it's right, okay, but that is a massive bombshell.
So because the biggest amount of people that are going to be there are going to be Celtic supporters, because that's what Clinton, he trained at Parkhead. I went, oh, what am I going to do? So I knew everybody. So I phoned up Celtic and I said, you're playing there. And I said, going to just move the game. And that's too naive or, up my own jacksie. I went, going to move the game. And they started laughing at me. He says, that's not how it works. He says, you can't do that. You can't, once the SFA and that and the Football League and that, once they've all said that that's when it's happening. And whoever they were playing, I spoke to them as well. It would be a great idea, but the SFA, they don't postpone any games for us. So why would they do it for you? So I knew them at the SFA as well. And I phoned them, explained the situation. And he went, I've never done that before. I said, well, tell you, why no do it? They went, I'll tell you what, Tommy, see if you can get Celtic, I can't remember who it was they were playing, see if you can get Celtic to agree to it, and you get their opponent to agree to it, we'll agree to it. So Tommy Gilmour is the one and only person that go to the SFA to cancel a Celtic game for Pat Clinton.
People talk about promoters sometimes, and you sometimes get a bit of bad press. That you're the Sharks and you're this and you're that, and you're just there to take the money. But you travelled to London, to New York, to Miami. You flipped the table to make the fight. You came back. You got the whole city behind you. That is a massive bombshell to come in, because that would have been an absolute disaster, because you want your whole city to be behind that fight that night and coming on board. And Celtic, as we know, massive club. So the supporters, it would have taken a lot of support away from what would have been watching the fight. Incredible, to hear that story. Incredible to hear that story. But take us to the night itself then.
Well, the night itself, we had a lovely big glossy programme. And every newspaper guy, from John Quinn at the Evening Times to Jim Reynolds at the Herald to Dick Curry at every newspaper guy in Scotland, I think maybe even Stuart Weir as well, everybody wrote a full page article in this big, beautiful, coloured, glossy magazine. And they all done it for nothing. And when they came to the fights, they were there to work, to report the fight, but they brought their wives with them as well. And we got it that everybody, and if you look all around the ringside, and Jim Watt and Ken Buchanan and Stephen Henry and all the football players, everybody that was anybody
was there.
Was that my night? Because
what did you get in there that night?
2,075. Which because that's all it held.
Yeah, so you packed it. You had it packed.
It was absolutely sold out, but we were running so close because we had done that. And to be honest, a lot of the expenses they had running the fights and going back and forward to to Miami and that I just paid it because that was my dream. This was, and it's probably selfish to say, this was about me and doing something that I wanted, and it didn't matter. The money was tiny. And to be honest, I've made more money at a sporting club show than I made at Pat Clinton winning the World Championship. But it wasn't about that. It was about doing it at the Kelvin Hall, because my grandfather had done there. All the big fights I'd seen when I worked with Peter Keenan and Mickey Duff and Jack Solomon's and them, they were at the Kelvin Hall. So I wanted to do it. And I didn't want to do it in any bigger place or weird place or anything. I just wanted to do it in the Kelvin Hall. And all the fancy stuff for the badges and stuff like that. We were running so close with the budget that my wife and my two kids, who were only school ages, we used to sit up after our tea at night, scissors and straighteners, and making all these things. So it was the best that we could do at that particular time. And it was a great family occasion. And it was just absolutely magic. And I probably had, after it was all done, and I came down to earth, because we'd spent the best part of about 3 months, because I think it was November I had went, and this was taking place in March. So I just lived and dreamt it for all 8 months. And when it was over, it was coming from a high to a low that was unbelievable. For every, I just wasn't functioning. I would go into the office, I couldn't function. It was painful. But if somebody said, would you swap it, to go back and do something else? Not a bit of it. There is no too many people that said, I've had a dream and I fulfilled it. And that was my dream. And out of all the world titles I was involved in after that, there was never another. There's only one Paddy Clinton, as we all sung. And that was what it was about. And it was quite selfish. And my son was in the ring with me that night when he won it. And it was just marvellous that we done it as a family, and everybody was shouting and cheering for it. It was great. Absolutely great.
To hear listening to your story and hear everything, I feel like I'm reliving it with you almost, because I can see how much passion. I mean, you're sitting here talking about it now, but back then you must have had sleepless nights. You must have been up to, it sounds like your wife, and it was a massive. I read somewhere actually that your wife was a massive influence in supporting you, but talking to you now, you can see
she still had a family. She still had a family to run.
Aye.
Still two kids were at school, and she had to do all the thing. And all our future was because at that time we weren't poor. We had our own house and we had our car and we went for holidays and all that. But to put up, when you say that your house at that time, I think my house cost 12,500 or 14,500 for my house cost. But here I was doing £100,000 to run a boxing event.
Yeah.
She had to be 100% at her back. And it worked, and I knew it would work, And
you had a vision, and you knew what you were.
That had to happen, and we all done it. And everybody, I can't think of anybody, all my pals that we went about with that. Everybody got at the back of it and just supported it, and all the press, because when the verdict was announced, I think you can see Stuart Weir in it. They jumped up like demented football supporters. They were up giving it, yahoo, they've done it. And they're all the pressmen are all dancing at the ringside. You don't see that.
Aye.
Never before, never since.
Yeah.
But that was it. And
I bet there was a party in Glasgow that night.
Oh aye, yeah. I spent more on the party than I made profits in the show.
I can imagine. I can imagine. But
Who
again,
cares?
you say it wasn't about. It just wasn't about the money. You will never ever. Your kids will never forget. Your
No.
grandkids will be told about it. You know, it's after 50 years for something like that to take place. You should be always be proud. I'm sure you are. You should be very, very proud of yourself for that, and your family, and your, you know, to your wife as well.
But it was great.
Unbelievable. I wish I was around to have witnessed that.
So that would have been another ticket would have sold.
Going forward, then, you know, you'll never ever achieve. I see what you're saying there. It's hard to top something like that feeling. But you went on to manage and promote 6 world titles. You had 6 world champions in total. Just touch on a few of those. Just, you know, where the fights were, who the fighters were.
Aye, but I mean, but was involved with one of the ones who's closest to my heart and was so loyal and everything to me was Jawed Khalik. And Jawed was the nicest guy that you could ever possibly. He used to be with Brendan Ingalls, and then he left Brendan Ingalls and he came with me, and I put him on one of the shows that Barry and I was doing, and we had a couple of fights, and then we got him a Commonwealth title fight. But then we got him the world title fight, and he won that. And but again, I don't know whether I loved him as much, because when I would go down to Nottingham, his dad and his brothers, and they would take me to the restaurant that the family would go to, and we would all sit down and eat curries and stuff like that. And if you done anything for him, that you were always thanked, and you know, anything you say that was okay. And I managed him, and he was looked after the trainer down there, Chris Aston, who I went on and had, you know, like Dale Robinson and James Hare, who won a world title, and Mark Hobson and so forth. So we had not a bad team, because I didn't interfere with the trainers unless there was something the matter. I just kind of managed fighters and promote them and created opportunities for them. But Jav was that, and that was one of the funny stories, and the reason I've mentioned it, because Jav was a good banger, and big tall boy was, but he was fighting a guy called Nesterenko, a Russian, defending his world title. So I was sitting at ringside, as I always do, you know, just in a chair like I'm sitting now, and I'm watching it. Things is not going great. And at that time, I had just started to wear glasses and so forth anyway, but I'm sitting at the ringside, and as I said, things is not going to be, and I'm always, and people would be watching, because I jumped out of my seat and I would go to the corner, and I was just a bundle of nerves, and it wasn't that I wasn't in control, but that's just the way that things affected me, because I got right into it. And then just the 11th round, Javis went bosh, and he's hit Nesterenko, and Nesterenko's went down like a pack of cards. And I went for a sitting position to jump up in the air. Mm-hmm. But as I jumped up in the air, I went,
oh dear.
And the secretary of the boxing board, Simon Block, he went, you better get, shouted to the ambulance man, you better get round there. Tommy's taking a heart attack. It was my glasses out of my top pocket. My glass.
You even got me there. I was thinking, oh bloody hell!
Because I could feel my glasses moving out my pocket, and at the time when I could feel them moving, and I went like that to stop my glasses coming out of my pocket. Oh. And they all thought I'd taken a heart attack.
My goodness. That's it. You honestly, you had me worried there. You had me going. So did he knock him out? You never got back up?
No. So he won that.
Was he down on points at that point in the 11th?
I thought it was just at the down. And then we took him to South Africa. Well, South Africa's no known for coming out with too many victories, and he was fighting their guy over there, and I had taken him out, and because, as I said, he was so nice, and so they were paying for us to go out, probably premium economy or whatever. But I says to Jav, see, when we got to South Africa, I said, I'm taking you first class. So I took him out. All the rest of the entourage, his trainers and all that,
economy.
They were sitting back.
That was his reward.
So he sat, and he went, these big seats, and sitting there, and people asking him what he would like for his dinner. But it was as much preparing him for the world title, because this was big, and it was when we went over there. But Jav was the nicest guy, and wasn't he an outgoing person? Probably at times lacked a wee bit of confidence in himself. So it was important that he was made to feel that he was the most important guy in the world. So I didn't want to go in business class or that, because the very best, for the best champion in the world, was first class, and you could just see, he's seen the difference, that he started to believe that he was a good fighter. And when we took him to the hotel, and the hotel, the promoter had gave us a nice suite, and Jav went like to me, this is bigger than my house. I tell you, it was bigger than my house. This was massive. And all of a sudden, he could feel that I'm an important guy, but I'm a humble guy. He was a very religious boy as well. And we Jav, but he went out and he won that fight, stopping the other guy. And he just, Jav never drank. He was a really and I've got a terribly soft spot for him. And then he got an MBE as well, which was great. And I was just so proud of everything that he done. So that was one of them, and and then there's other stories, that you had, but they're the wee ones that kind of stick my mind a wee bit, because
you had a real bond. You had a real bond with Pat and Jav. Sounds like
as things was changing and television was changing, and Barry had lost the big TV contract and so forth, and people were blowing into Jav's ears. Come with us, we'll do this for you, we'll do that. Jav, no. He went, Tommy took me to the top, and if anything, but at that time, he was starting to, he'd reached his peak, and he was starting to go that way. Mm-hmm. And he didn't deserve to go that way. So I had said to him, but I was glad that he took my advice to retire. So retired as the undisputed welterweight champion of the world.
Unbelievable.
And they can't take that away from you. He didn't overstay his welcome and everything. And all during that, because his brother and him, they had a taxi company. But I would never ever let him. He went, I'll maybe deal it. No. Yeah. All the money that you earn for the boxing has got to be put away to be kept for a future life when you're finished. And everybody's no one to fight you. You've got to look after your wife and all the kids. And he kept the business, him and his brother. And when he was training, his brother looked after the business. So I knew that he'd done well. And he accepted, and he didn't listen to the ear hole blowers, which you get today and you got then, and you've had it for time immemorial.
I like what you said there, Tommy. I like, a lot of bloodsuckers out there that, want to make a few more quid. And I like the fact that you gave him the advice at that point. Now listen, it's time You know, time to hang them up. You've done everything. But you've done the pinnacle. You've achieved all the heights. But you could tell, obviously, that if he goes a bit too far here, things could
You lose your you lose your legacy.
You lose your legacy, and he could get hurt as well. That's when fighters can get hurt.
And they are the last people in the world who will admit, because it's a very, very hard thing to do. You know, and you hear them. I was listening to a program last week with Frank Bruno. See when you're used to being in the paper every week.
Yeah.
See when you're used to being feted. See when all of a sudden the invitations stop coming, or you're no going and doing something, and you're no in the papers, and you're no doing the interviews. It becomes a very lonely place, you know, and that's why people retire and make a comeback, because there's a big void left in their life and they don't know how to fill it.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got to do it, and that was why it was important with Alexei, and certainly in Jav's case, that he kept the business that him and his brother had, so he still had an interest, and he still had, but he was a shy boy anyway, but he was good for the whole community. And he's got, if you look up Javed Khalik on the internet, you'll see how much good that he does for his community and everything else. But I've said, and I've fell out with boxing in the past, time you called it a day. And I don't like to say it like that. I used to use it, you know, instead of gaining my fight every 6 weeks, I would make it every 6 months, so that they knew, well, I'm not getting many fights, I'll just chuck it.
Yeah.
You know, and it wasn't for being cruel, because you knew that they weren't going to get to, they were maybe British champions or European champions or world champions, whatever it was, but they weren't going to get that. They were going to be used as a stepping stone for somebody else.
Yeah.
And I fell out with one fighter in particular, because I told him it was time to chuck it, and ended up he went elsewhere, and he got beat with guys that weren't even good enough to spar with him when he was
just
boxing.
Because his time was, if he'd let
because they don't want, because fighters fight. Fighters just love to get out and do it. Now they become influencers, or they become, you know, social media and stuff like that. They've maybe get things to keep, but when you're getting back, then it was difficult, and you got to use it. And I always use the added, you know, try to treat them the way I would like to be treated myself. And I had a soft spot because my grandfather was a boxer, so I was always at the forefront and wanting to know about what was needed for medicals and stuff like that, and what they could put forward. And never ever said to a fighter, "You've got to take a fight," because see, at the end of the day, he's the guy that's taking the punishment.
Aye.
So you should never force anybody into them, because boxing is too difficult a situation to be forced into doing anything. But we're still here.
One of the other big things that you did, you mentioned Barry Hearn a few times. So you've obviously done quite a bit of work with Barry's. Obviously, you know, they've built that match room up to great heights. His son now is gone through the roof. Eddie, he's everywhere and anywhere. He's even working with Canelo now. But one of the big things you did with Barry was you brought Chris Eubank to Glasgow. A wee bit on that story.
Well, the thing is, and I managed a boxer called Stevie Boyle, who was a British champion, big puncher. And Barry had he'd only just come into the game. By this time I owned the St Andrews Sporting Club, and I had all these fighters, Stevie Boyle and Ronnie Carl and Drew Dockery and Ian McLeod. I had all the best boxers. So I got a call from that Barry wanted to come. We'd never met each other in my life before. That he had a boxer called Carol Crook, and he wanted a British title fight for us. And he came up, and we sat in the old Albany in the restaurant in there, and we time with away, and he went, "I want to make it." I went, "I don't want to fight." He said, "Oh well, I think that, and I'll offer you this amount of money," which was very good money, you know, because Barry was, if Barry wants something, he'll dig deep. I went, I don't want it. And it was a lot more than Boyle was earning at that time. I said, I don't want it. Oh, you'll need to do it. I went, let me tell you, as long as I'm managing Stevie Boyle, you'll not be fighting Carol Crook. No, well, that's it. So anyway, we just, that was it.
Was a wrong fight for him, Tommy?
The wrong fight. And that'll go on, because later on, when Boyle and I split up and he went his own way, Barry was then in a position where he made the fight with Stevie Boyle and Carol Crook. And Carol Crook won by a canter, no problem. It was a wrong fight.
You knew that. You knew that.
And I didn't want to, not even for any money. So that was it. So we had a nice lunch and probably a glass of wine or whatever. And he went his way. And then he announced that he was bringing Chris Eubanks to Scotland to fight Tony Thornton. So my pal in Manchester, Jack Trickett, he was pal with Barry, he'd say to Barry, if you're going to Scotland, you need to deal with Tommy Gilmour. And Barry went, he's a nice enough guy, he says, but it's hard work. And he went, Jack says, look, he said, I'm telling you, I knew his dad and everything. He said, if you're going to go to Scotland, he's the guy that you've got to say, because he knows everybody, he knows all the thing, because remember I had promoted Clint before, so everybody knew that because
you could make the biggest noise for the fight. You had all the contacts.
So Barry ended up coming to see me, and we agreed what the deal, what my involvement in the show would be, and what I was. Right.
I'm loving your ringtone there, Tommy.
It's no me, it's Stephanie's. Stephanie. Steph. Oh. I can phone back. Sorry about that.
No, you're all right. You're fine.
Oh, mine's just Scotland the Brave.
I like that. I was expecting you to start jumping around there. That's a great one as well. But I like yours as well. But you were saying.
So he came and he done he done a deal with me for what we were, our involvement, what we would do, what we would provide, and so forth. So we were like helping to manage the show for him. But then we signed the deal, and then he moved the deal and put it into a bigger setting. So that meant all the numbers didn't add up for me then. So I phoned him and I said, you need to come up and see us. I said, you've moved it, you've took it to Hull twice the size or whatever, and you've done that. And okay. Now in the Albany, when you come in, you would come up, we were on the mezzanine floor in the Albany, and when you came, there was a big long corridor, maybe 100 yards long or whatever, and my office was at the very bottom of it, and I could look down if my door was open, I could look down and see people coming in. Now I sat at a nice big desk in my office and so forth, and I had a settee which was a bit lower. So Barry's a big guy, very imposing. So at that time I was beginning to reckon, because he was always upbeat, energetic. So he had to come in. And I went, just sit down there. But my seat was that low. He had to look up to me. You see? Aye, right. I said, this is not right. He said, all right, okay, what's the matter? So I went, that, and that. That'll be okay. So I shouted to my secretary in the next office. I said, right, come in, make the changes on the contract. I says, and then she done that. And I said, there you are, Barry, you take that away. And if that's what we have agreed today, sign it and send it back to me. And he just took his pen, went to the back page and signed his name. I said, you never even read that. He said, if you tell me that's okay, it will be okay. And that was the last contract that I ever signed with him. From then on, we became pals. We became family friends. I've been at Eddie and Katie's wedding, and they were at Christopher's wedding and stuff like that. We became family friends. We went on holiday together. We just had to, but we're so different from one another. And that's what the beauty is. You know, when I get something into my head, I've got to kind of get it done. And Barry was, I was nuts and bolts and sorted things, and he was,
it'll be all right, we'll get it done.
We'll get it done. And if we lost money in one show, we'll get it back next week. And it was great. And for all I was good at what I was doing, there was certain confidences that I learned from Barry. And he knew me, and he knew that I was a bloody stubborn Glaswegian Scotsman, you know, but so much that everybody stayed at the Albany because I had a deal with the Albany, and so that was the Fight Hotel as such. But Barry put Eubanks down at the Crown Plaza, so that Eubanks and me wouldn't go head to head. Because if Chris would have said something, I would have said no. And then Barry's got to deal with Eubanks, and he's got to deal with me.
He's meant to be a nightmare to deal with.
Aye. And yet he's a smashing guy, but the stories I could tell you and the laughs that we had, but Barry went, oh, I've got enough to run the business without having to put up with used to. You know, but we really, you know, I think it was Hugh Keevans or something, he used to call it like Barnum and Bailey, you know, I mean, and with Barry, that we just had so much time together. He would go and he would get the sponsors up on the television, and I put the fights and that together, and he would say, right, we're bidding for this Eubanks fight, Wayne jumping, and he would send me to Puerto Rico or in the Caribbean for a day. And another day we went to South Africa for a day. We flew in, got a shower, jumped in a helicopter, flew to Sun City, done a deal in Sun City, because at that time I was heavily involved with baby Jake McLalla, and he had Eubanks. So we done a deal in Sun City, had our lunch in Sun City, flew back down to Johannesburg, had another bit of tea, jumped in the plane and came home.
Bloody hell.
You know, but they were all great things and stuff like that. And when we went to New York, we would fly out in Concorde and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So it was great fun to be around, and also before I had met him at that first meeting, I had phoned Ian Doyle, who managed Stephen Henry, and I had said to Ian, because Ian's father used to be managed by my grandfather, so we knew each other. And I says to him, I've got Barry Hearn coming to see me. What's he like? Oh, he says, he's a slippery so-and-so. He says, but never worry about getting paid. I said, that's the finest accolade, because there's so many fly-by-nights out there. And I seen that happening, because when Storm Seal went to the wall, Barry put all his own money into to save snooker tournaments and stuff like that. And that's exactly how we've sometimes I owe him money, sometimes he owes money, and we don't bother settling up till we sit down with a bottle of wine and write each other a check. And I couldn't have wished for anybody better to be associated with. He didn't manage my business and I didn't manage his business, but together we had that added bit that they were great friends with some right tear-ups. Oh, major.
You can imagine.
Oh, major. I remember there was something that I wasn't happy with, and he wanted to do it and I wasn't happy. And then at that time, it was the early days, so I had the phone in my car, and I had all the trimmings, the early time. And I phoned his car phone, phoned his office, phoned his house, no answer. And by this time I was getting majorly pissed off, you see. So I came in and it would only be mid-afternoon. I says to Veronica, my wife, I went, right, drive me down to the airport. Where are you going? I said, I'm going to London. I'm going down. I said, he's not answering the phone. I'm going to see him. So I'm down, and I'd only probably got to Paisley or whatever. And the lad phones me and he went, hello, how are you doing? And he would give me all the, and I went, what do you want? He went, you were looking for me? Aye. I said, he said, where are you? I said, I'm in the car. Where are you going? I said, I'm going to the airport. Are you going somewhere? I said, I'm going to London to see you. I'll not be in. I said, well, see when you come out of the house in the morning to get the milk, I'm the guy lying beside it. He went, aye, right. Just turn the car round, go back to the house, have mad passionate love for your wife, and we'll speak later. And he just totally defused me.
Yeah.
Absolutely just annihilated me. And he phoned me that night. Now, what's the trouble with you? Because he always thinks I'm a bit wonky. What's the matter? So I would tell him, aye, all right, we'll just date your way. Or whatever. Or here's why I want to date my way. But we always wanted, but we've never fallen out. Another time what we done, because he got me involved in the snooker or in the darts. Because I was retiring. I was wanting to retire when I was 55. And Barry said to me, you're too young. He says, you'll climb. He says, you'll know. I said, Veronica, we're going to do a lot. He went, you do a lot of travelling now. He went, you're too young. So I said, aye, okay. You know, because I would tell him and we would discuss things and he would give me the wisdom that he's got. And I went, aye, okay. And then fortunately, then there was a financial crisis where everything was folding up. So for getting, big, interest rates and so forth, like the whole world, we all came flat. We weren't skint, but we weren't making as much money as we did. So that was that. But he was absolutely right. 55 was too young. So when it came to, it was 62, and I went, I'm chucking about. When I was after the 55, carry on. He says, we've got to get you involved. I said, here, I'm just retiring. I said, I've been doing this for 40 years. No. He said, there's a guy, he said, that's coming out of the snooker, or out of the darts. He says, and he says, a good player. He says, a Scotsman. He says, Gary Anderson. Well, I'm being honest. I knew nothing about darts. And I knew nothing about Gary Anderson. So he says to me, no, he says, go and meet the guy. So there was a thing at the Royal Highland Showground. There was the darts there. So Gary was coming up to see me. So I picked him up at Glasgow Airport. And before we got to Livingston, I was his new manager. And again, like that, we signed a couple of contracts. And now we just tolerate one another and we're here, we're just saying.
Gary Anderson, you're obviously talking about, he's now the two-time world champion, and I bet you know a bit about the darts now because the darts it's incredible. I mean, I've got mates that travel all the way down to the what would you call it? The
Ali Pali.
They travel down to Paisley, weekend down there, travel back up. They love it.
See the thing with that, and I didn't know, and I don't profess to know, but go back a half an hour to when we were talking. See the excitement that I got with watching my boxers. That returned to me.
Brilliant.
With Gary Anderson. It was just me and Gary, and it was just a wee interest, and just thing, and I didn't allow him to be sponsored by anybody for the first few years, because so that nobody could buy him on the cheap. Now he's a two-time world champion, double Premier League champion and everything like that. But we just got on, and we have the same kind of outlook, this kind of grumpy Scottish outlook, you know. Barry
obviously realised that would be a match, lovely matchmaking.
And this is when the thing, he went, no, he says, Tommy, you'll have a great time. You'll just love it, and it'll be great. I went, aye, okay. And so he says, and you'll no need to worry about anything. I said, aye, fine. So then, again, it went on, and I was doing a press conference in London, and somebody says to me, I says, oh, Barry Hearn. I said, he tells lies. So about 20 minutes later, what is this all about? You're saying that I tell lies. I says, so you do. How? What do you mean? I says, well, you got me involved in this snooker, or this darts. You got me involved in that, and you told me that it would be completely stress-free. I said, well, it's no. I said, so you're telling me lies? And he went into hysterics, but you want to see it hit the internet and all that. Tommy Gilmour says that Barry Hearn tells lies.
And I thought it might have been something serious, but it was obviously just, said in jest, rather than, but it made headlines that you said that Barry Hearn lied to me, and I thought, I'll need to ask him about this,
what. That's what it was about. I said, well, you did. I said, I've got the stresses back there. I said, I took up the darts. I said, because you told me it'd be stress-free and I would have a load of fun. I says, no, it's no. And he found it funny enough, but it's amazing how things can be taken out of context and people go, Barry Hearn tells lies.
That's it. It's made a headline when really it was just a bit of banter between two.
Aye. It was an in-house joke
that made the media, and he's on the phone 20 minutes later saying what you calling me a liar for. Listen, it's been quite amazing to hear some of your. I could chat to you, I'm sure, easily for another couple of hours, because you must have so many stories to tell. But to hear about your journey, hear about the Pat Clinton fight, I love that story. To hear about your relationship with Barry Hearn, and the darts as well. How you keeping? How's your health?
Very, very well. The only thing that's killing me, same as everybody else, this is why I wear these glasses, because I'm kind of Glasgow's answer to Alan Wicker. I'm normally away in holidays.
Yeah.
When I retired at first, I was away every month of the year, either for a week or a long weekend or a holiday. And I've been fortunate enough, I've travelled to every corner of the globe except Australia and New Zealand.
I've been to both, Tommy. You definitely need to get yourself out there, but just be ready for a bloody long flight.
Aye, well, I've done Antarctica and the Falkland Islands. I've done Tahiti. I've done the Far East. I've done all through America, Canada, Alaska, up into there isn't a place apart from Australia and New Zealand. Went to Argentina, went to Brazil, so, because Barry Hearn, you're just a tourist. Because I remember we went to Sacramento, he had a fighter fighting for the world title. So him and I are away out to Sacramento, and we've booked in, and I went, I said, I'm away out, are you coming with me? Where are you going? I said, I'm going into old Sacramento. I said, I want to see where the saloons were and where they tied up the horses. He went, you're just a tourist. And then when I come back, he went like that. He said, Veronica was on the phone. He said, I just tell him, oh, he's away in his travels again. I said, look at all the places that you go to, And I just always wanted to do it, because I remember after one of the shows in South Africa, I'd been in the hospital for an operation and I hadn't been keeping well. And got a gallbladder removed and so forth. So we had this show in South Africa, so I said, right, I'm going to South Africa for the fight. I said, and then I'm just flying back. No, I said, I've sorted it out. He went, I'm taking you, he says, because you've not been well, I'm taking you. He says, we're going for South Africa. He says, then we've got to stop in Bangkok because I've got a meeting with the TV people. He says, and then we're going on to Hong Kong to see the show that never took place. You know that, what was it, Bruno and Steve Collins and all them, and they pulled it the day before it. I said, no, I said, I'm not going. I said, because I said, it's a long way, I said, and on flights, it's 10 and 12 hour flights all the time. And he went, no, he says, you're coming, he says, and we'll take Eddie with us. So Eddie would only be 12 or 14, you know, so but we went out to, he took me out there, flew me out first class, so I was in the comfort, all down to him. He picked up the bills for everything, staying in all the best hotels. And the only thing is, when we go to Bangkok, he went, I'll be away for 2 hours. He says, take Eddie out. He says, and he says, you just go shop, laid on a car and a chauffeur and all that for me to take Eddie, going looking for all the snide watches. You know.
Just in current times, Eddie's trying to obviously make a big fight just now that, you know, the whole world is licking her lips at the prospect of Anthony Joshua fighting against Fury. First of all, do you think the fight gets made? And second of all, what's your prediction on that one?
I think the money's going to get made. You know, the fight's going to get made because where else can you get that, generate 200 million? You know, so that's going to be, it's not a case of making the matches, that's going to be TV produced. So I think that it's definitely going to happen because, you know, they could still fight Fury and could fight somebody and Joshua could, and they'll still make X amount of million, but it'll not come anywhere. Reach, they'll get five times the amount of money.
And they're both at the. We see too many fights, Tommy. Mayweather Pacquiao, for instance, we've seen that 5 years too late. You know, I would be sad to see that happen with this one. Now's the time to make it. They're both at the top of their game.
Who'll win? I could make a case for the two of them. I always found that Anthony had problems with people who went close to him and stayed close to him because he's such a big, enormous guy, you know, and he needed that wee bit of leverage.
Well, it showed in that Ruiz. It showed in that Ruiz.
So he needed that wee bit of that half a step so that he could get all the impact. Mm-hmm. So you could say that for Joshua. And with a lot of the styles of the fights you see with Fury, that he tends to lie in and top of people and might nullify them. But if the fight goes at a distance where an Anthony hits you, you know, but you seen how brave that Fury was when he got up off the canvas, because you would have
thought he was asleep.
You would have laid odds that, you know, he was never getting up in a million years, but he got up and he showed it. I think it's an absolutely fantastic match where you're seeing two guys, as you say, you know, at their peak and deserve. I'm not into all the trash talking right enough. Yeah.
It sells the fights, doesn't it?
But it shouldn't need
social media.
The quality should sell the fight. You shouldn't need to say things about people. You shouldn't need to say things about and denigrate each other in any shape or form. I'm just no into that. But there again,
well, if you look at the Eubank Ben days, people as much as you know, some of it went a bit overboard. There's no doubt about it. But people were just gripped by this hatred between the two of these guys.
Aye, but the thing is, Eubanks was just so funny, and Nigel was so intent, you know. So when we had these fights up here with Ben and Eubanks, and each of them had had their own personalities. But I enjoyed it better then, and you know, because when you see them having press conferences now, you know, everything's all for the internet. I like to go back. When we done the Eubanks, that was prior to the internet and stuff like that. When we done Eubanks and Tony Thornton and Eubanks and the other guy, they'll get that done in the other line. You got Eubanks when he fought the Irishman, close, very close, and things. And people would maybe say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that." Barry couldn't make the press conference that day because he normally would lead it off, and I would have the bits and speak about the undercards and so forth. But he said, "No, you tell me that day and so forth." And that's what I'm saying with a lot of the things and the BS and stuff like that. Barry taught me a lot of that as well. You know what I mean? That he was the ultimate salesman. But I remember sitting that day, and Ray Close was a Mormon.
Okay.
For Belfast, and just being, you know, the Glasgow and West of Scotland press, they were all there, and TV was there, and the radio was there, and probably 20 different reporters for all the different newspapers and so forth. And Ray Close, and this is absolute and God's honest truth, Ray Close was asked the question, because remember all the troubles in Ireland and what was happening. So he was a Mormon, and one of the West of Scotland press says to him, "Are you a Catholic Mormon or a Protestant Mormon?" Now, we just thought that this was the funny thing, because you could only say that in the West of Scotland. But I mean, if you were saying it today, where things people are ultra sensitive and ultra woke and everything else, but that was funny for me. You know, the guy's religious beliefs is Mormon, and he said, "Are you a Catholic Protestant Mormon?" And nobody took offence, and we all laughed and everything else. But they were the beauty of having live press conferences rather than, and each newspaper would ask their own questions, and whereas they're all fear now to ask, you know, they all want to have their can I get 5 minutes from here? Can I get 5 minutes from there? You know, rather than just having an open press conference and having a laugh, because we made them, they were fun. You know, we made a fuss of the press in the days. You know, they would get invited in for a wee buffet and that before the press conference, and then they could do their private things after it. And that's why we got so much good press, because we were dominating the back pages in boxing, where the football were in the second back pages and the inside pages. And boxing was a big thing away for what I can remember away back in the late 50s, you know. But that was all the fun. I'm not sure whether I'd make a lot more money the day, but I'm not sure that if I would have as much fun.
Right. Oh, you're right. It's the times have changed, and you don't get to see those open banter. The UFC still do it a wee bit. The MMA, they have like an open, and it makes for a lot of banter. But listen, Tommy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Like I said, I could sit and listen to you chat about. I love my boxing. I can't wait to get this out there. I'm sure I've got many people, many boxing people in particular, that are really going to enjoy this, listening to some of your stories.
Well, hopefully.
But you take care, and I'll chat to you for a second after I finish here.
Right.